in this role?
Unfortunately, women can get in, but only if they play along. So, for instance, there's something that's happening in this country that I find very upsetting, that all of us should find very upsetting, is a gutting of the child labor laws. Children have already died because of it. Teenagers working in very, very unsafe environments. Their prefrontal lobes aren't even completely developed yet. It's horrifying things. And there are two states that are leading the pack in this gutting of child labor laws. They're both led by women. Kim Reynolds in Iowa and Sarah Huckabee Sanders in Arkansas. So unfortunately, just being a woman, what has happened over the last few decades, corporate power, political power, yeah, you can come in as long as once you get in, you begin to align yourself and begin to mimic the same principles, patriarchal principles that were there before you got here. So just electing a woman in and of itself does not do the trick.
Yeah.
It's got to go deeper than that. It's got to be a real feminization of consciousness. And there are men in this world, as we know, who reflect and display and demonstrate that more than some women do.
Yeah.
To care for the earth, care for the children, care for each other, come from the inner dimensions of decision-making, reflection, compassion, mercy, justice.
Would you say that those are the strengths that souls in female bodies, a woman, bring into leadership roles today?
Some women do, some women don't. And also we're living at a time with all this non-binary and fluidity of gender. We do want to be careful how we discuss it. I think all of us have within us masculine and feminine. I think the way I think of it is, okay, I was born as a woman. I have within myself masculine and feminine, but I almost think of like I came onto the earth this time to major in feminine, minor in masculine. And same with heterosexual men the other way. But now with the fluidity and the gender balance and the non-binary, some people's experience is different. That's fine too. But no matter what, I think there are definitely masculine as well as feminine aspects of consciousness. Germaine Greer famously said that the opposite of patriarchy is not matriarchy, but fraternity. I think we're seeking balance. There is a divine masculine, just as there's a divine feminine. I've learned that in my life. And I think it took me some interesting experiences to get that. And I think both need to be honored. Obviously, we live in a world that does not honor the divine feminine. And as you and I have been saying throughout this call, that's not going to change if women and those who identify as women don't start showing up for each other.
True. You mentioned this a little bit at the beginning, but I'd like to see if we can go a little bit deeper in it, because in your career, while it's filled with such achievements, you have had your fair share of setbacks. How do you handle criticism and still maintain your resilience? Because sometimes as women, we tend to be the sensitive gender. We care about what people say. But when you're changing things, it's not about caring what people say. It's about caring about the whole picture and the whole story. I get it. But how are you managing the criticism and still being resilient to go out there and campaign for President of the United States, but also to campaign universally for all souls to be able to stand up for truth?
I've always felt that when somebody criticizes you, your first responsibility is to ask, is any part of what they say true? And if even 10% of it is, there's something to learn there. And sometimes people criticize you in a respectful and legitimate way. That is part of growth process. And my only, response to that is thank you. Other criticism is lies, smears, the most vicious, unethical stuff you can possibly imagine. And the heartbreak is not only that people would act that way, some of whom you treated very fairly and can't even imagine what this is. But another part of the heartbreak is that people believe that. So when you ask me, how do I take it? Sometimes it's hard, but several things come up for me. One is a line from Martin Luther King that there's redemptive power in unearned suffering. Another, and I realized that he was speaking about suffering deeper than mine, because what is this compared to what some women in this world go through in certain countries where it would be a lot more than what I'm going through. Number two, I remember a line a friend of mine said to me when I was thinking about doing all this and something was unfair. He said, "Toughen up, buttercup." Number three, I remember that when I was considering doing this, I knew it would be hard. It took me a long time. You and I had conversations about this. And I knew that it was like running into a burning building, but I felt like the image I got was that I would be filled with a spiritual fire retardant. Number four, I realized that to give up would be to let down not only myself, but what I know are millions of people who see things as I do. And I just keep feeling, Sister Jenna, just stay with it. Stay with it. And if there's a chance, and I do think there's a chance, that I become president of the United States, all of this will have helped prepare me. Because I do say to myself, oh, you think they're tough on you now? Wait till you win.
I love that. I love that. Wait till you win. Let's keep that one. I love that. So as we get to a close, in your campaign, you have discussed a new economic beginning, including proposals like universal health care, tuition-free college. How do you envision these initiatives promoting greater equity, especially for women in marginalized communities?
I'm sorry, the middle of your sentence was, how do I what?
How do you envision these initiatives promoting greater equity, especially for women and marginalized communities?
I'll give you an example. If you look at a single woman who is a mother, a single mother in the United States, versus the economic condition of a single mother in any other advanced democracy. In any other advanced democracy, that woman is on economic par with men. Here, the single mother is way below. Why is that? Because in those other countries, they have universal health care. We have 1 in 4 Americans who live with medical debt. We have, because we have not passed the ERA yet, we have a gap between wages regarding women and also regarding people of color and people in marginalized communities. So once you remove the college loan debt, once you expand Medicare to everyone, once you go back to a time, before the 1970s, we had a version of tuition-free college and tech schools in University of Florida system, California system, and Texas system. These are all things which create a more equitable society, because right now, what we have is, if you have money, you have easy access to healthcare. If you have money, you have easy access to higher education. If you have money, you're not carrying these college loan debts. So all of these things, which are infusions of massive economic hope and opportunity into the life of the working people of the United States, all of those shrink the enormous and immoral gap and income inequality in the United States. We need to do more than that as well. We need to have a fairer tax system. And we have there are other elements such as support for labor, all of which contribute to the righting of a ship that is listing so far to the one side that only relative few Americans have an easy time just making it in this country. It's wrong, it's undemocratic, and it is unsustainable.
Yeah, so true. As we come to a close, there is a quote that has been viral for many years. And when South African President Nelson Mandela, sorry about that, when former South African President Nelson Mandela read your quote, everyone thought it came from him. If it's okay with you, could we end our show with that quote that so many of us live by to keep us going every day?
Well, this is the thing. It's only an urban myth that he quoted it. He didn't. He never quoted it. He didn't say it. But even that has an interesting element, doesn't it? Like what? He, in his office has said it. Listen, if Nelson Mandela, first the urban myth was that he'd written them, right? Okay, and then people got, well, he couldn't have because of copyright laws when the book was written and when he was in prison. Then it was that he quoted it. Now, if Nelson Mandela had quoted my words, I would be deeply honored, but he didn't. But isn't it interesting that that's out there? I
thought so. I thought so.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. And somehow I think there are some people who find it somehow a more serious quote if a man either wrote it or a man quoted it. Or
what could we hear from your mouth?
Well, if I remember, I think I'm one of the few people I know who doesn't have it memorized, but I'll try. And by the way, I want to say this. The subtitle of that book, that quote comes from a book called Return to Love. And the subtitle of that book is Reflections on the Principles of A Course in Miracles. So I can't take personal credit for the quote in the sense that it's just a reflection on a principle from the Course. It is interesting, though, Sister Jenna. I have no idea how that one paragraph that's not separated from any other part of the book somebody did it. Somebody separated it out, and I just find it so odd. Anyway, so let's try to remember what it says. It says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. We ask ourselves, who am I to be talented, gorgeous? I think it says then, same. What is it that says actually?
Well, that's why I was going to look for it. I was looking for it.
Gorgeous, fabulous. And then it says, in fact, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. You are meant to shine as all children do. You're playing small. You're playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people will feel more comfortable around you. You are meant as you liberate. Should I go get the book?
No, let me do it for you. Here.
Okay, you do it.
We've got to end it with this because it is so powerful. Ready?
Okay.
Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We're all meant to shine, as children do. We were born to manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we're liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Ladies and gentlemen, vote for Marianne Williamson for President of the United States. Marianne, thank you so much. Can I tell you how much talking to you always inspires me and touches me?
Well, right back at you. Thank you so much. And when you were reading that quote right now, it was perfect for me to hear right now, too. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Marianne Williamson, all the very best. Thanks for joining the Power Woman. Me too. Take care. Take care.
The theme of Power of Women embodies collaboration through edutainment across diasporas through the collectives alliances that support positive global change.
Dr. Bhavani, Dr. Krishna Shri, Dr. Priya, and Dr. Prema, thank you so much for being here today at the Power of Women Digital Conference. And as a part of the C20 leadership, we're very excited to speak to you and really learn about all the incredible work you have been doing for the past year through C20, which is Civil 20 for G20. Please, I'll start with Dr. Bhavani. Please, can you tell us a little bit about your role in G20?
Hi, thank you so much for having me here on this panel. My role at C20 was primarily a little bit on the back end of the overall C20, so I was assisting the C20 chair. But at the same time, I was also the working group lead on gender equality and women's empowerment. This was my primary role in C20.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Prema, can you just give us a little bit about what your role is and what your working group is about?
My role was primarily on the education and digital transformation working group, coordinating that effort.
Amazing. And Dr. Priya, welcome. And can you share a little bit about your working group?
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I was one of the leads for the C20 working group on integrated holistic health, mind, body, and environment. So public health and also traditional forms of medicines. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. And Dr. Krishna Shri, can you share a little bit about your working group?
Hello, good morning. Basically, I worked on the vertical related to technology, security, and transparency, and was part of the team that really coordinated both international and the national effort towards bringing together civil societies that work around this space.
Thank you so much. You know, I wanted to have this conversation with you on behalf of everyone, all of civil society, and especially for the younger generation. This year, C20, I got to know about C20 this year because of Power of Women and G20, because of the presidency was held by India. Before that, it was very much something that was way out of our reach, something the governments were working with at the highest level. So I would love to understand. I have a few questions because this year was very, very different, very interesting, because the chair of C20 2023 for G20 was a humanitarian and a spiritual leader, Ammaji, from India. So this is very different, I feel like, from the previous years when they started in 2013, C20 when it was established. So if all of you can tell us what do you think this role of C20 is, and how Ammaji, being the chair of C20 for G20, really shaped that role moving forward for the rest of the world? I think any of you can go ahead. I don't know if Dr. Bhavani, Dr. Priya, Dr. Krishna Shri, please.
Yeah, I can go first, I think. I think Amma's universal vision of compassion that she practices in upholding and perceiving everyone and everything equally as a manifestation of the divine was a great example of how inclusivity and care can be transformative. I think Amma was also very keen on having a wide representation from grassroots organizations. So for the vertical that I was representing, just quoting Amma, she says that technology is very important and it has increased conveniences and made life comfortable. But at the same time, the abuse of technology has also increased, and so has its dangers. So that is why extensive research on the negative impact of any new invention or discovery is essential, because it is deployed to the population at large. So the new should never be allowed to trample on the old. That's saying it is better to prevent than cure. So new discoveries can also mean unique new hazards. So before such discoveries become a permanent headache to society, we need to find solutions to their potential negative repercussions and threats that could manifest. So she had actually guided this vertical in a three-pronged approach, you could say. One is to reach out to many diverse communities, countries, people, to understand how technology has affected them and hear their voices. Second would be to deliberate with experts and multiple stakeholders And third would be to really articulate policies based on these and also look at initiatives that can be put in place with achieving these policies. So we had evolved close to 21 policy recommendations and gotten involvements of 122 countries in this process.
That's incredible. And I think what you just said is so important because of the digital space is why we are able to have this conversation and have this collaboration with C20 to really reach out to civil society. And Dr. Priya, we were just talking a little bit earlier with what Dr. Krishna Shri said and what the impact Ammaji has brought into C20. I think it's important for all of us to understand what C20 is, because I think a lot of us don't even realize we are all a part of this. And because it's with G20, we feel it's very much exclusive to a certain group of people, a certain group of organizations, but that was really dismantled with India's presidency and Amma being the chair. We are all able to be a part of the conversation. So if you can really explain to our audience what is C20 and how you all came to be a part of it.
I think I'm going to be honest. You had already said that you hadn't really heard of C20 before India's presidency, and I think I can share that sentiment with you. I mean, apart from just learning something in our textbooks about the Great Nations 20, no idea what about it, what countries are there, zero idea. And I think that once Amma was given the chair and we were, honored to have the responsibility of coordinating some of these working groups, we started that journey to understand what C20 or Civil Society 20 actually meant. And I think traditionally it is a gathering or a getting together of civil society organizations that work internationally, multinationally, and it's a very intensive discussion on policy building. And though it's, I'm sure, done incredible service, it's been a lot of meetings and discussions at a very high level. And I think one of the very interesting and honestly very heartwarming aspects of Civil Society 20 India was kind of broadening that concept of what civil society actually meant, because in its broadest sense, you are civil society, I am civil society. Any single individual who is trying to serve anyone around them, they also fall into that category of civil society. For example, during the COVID pandemic, there was this story that was going around of a poor woman in Tamil Nadu, South India. She was so poor, she didn't even have money to pay for her own slippers, but she was so inspired by seeing the suffering around her. She was so pushed to do something that she decided, I'm going to make sure that I give breakfast for at least 2 people. That's all I can afford now. And gradually, she kind of grew her small kitchen to provide for the people who became unemployed due to the COVID pandemic. So she's also a civil society organization, although she may not be registered in some kind of a national database. So when Amma received the chair, she had given all of us very clear guidance as to when you are talking to people to really understand what problems are in society, be it technology, be it diversity, inclusivity, health, technology, environment. Find out what the real problems are. This year we represent the Global South. It's Indonesia, India, and Brazil. These were the 3 countries that were coordinating it. It's called the Troika. And representing the Global South altogether gave us a unique opportunity to really reach people that may never have had an opportunity to come out and speak. And it gave, I believe, a very unique flavor, a compassion-driven, very practical direction to the policy recommendations that came out. And honestly, as in any high-level meeting, they may be taken at a governmental level. They may not be taken at a governmental level. But I think that in the bigger sense, it doesn't actually matter, because just coming together, sharing of minds, and creating that impetus for us to have more concrete, clear steps of how I can approach or how I can address the biggest issues that the people feel. I think that's what C20 did this year, and I hope that we can take that forward. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. I think it's very special because we didn't really have that before that. And I think Amma's compassion, especially being spiritually grounded. And as you're the one of the coordinators of the holistic health, I think that's a part of well-being. Spiritual well-being is a part of that. And her bringing that is something not spoken enough. And I think that's very special. And I'm going to get to Dr. Bhavani because that's gender equality and women's empowerment. But I want to actually talk to Dr. Prema next about education, going from Dr. Priya, because how can we actually bring the component of education into really allowing people to know this, and what you have been doing in terms of really bringing that component? Because I think civil society really integrated a lot of people, civil society, you and I, like people just who are on this planet living life that's being affected and impacted by everything that's going on. How do you think your role, your working group played a role in terms of really bringing people together to create policies, definitely?
Our C20 chair actually provided the vision for the C20 Education and Digital Transformation Working Group. And because Amma has founded the global network of charitable institutes, has so many volunteers globally, founded both academic institutions and also the civil society. The government has also many times requested Amma for help in outreach activities. And so the foundation for education was already there, established by Amma as a role model for us. And the culture of compassion is what Amma also brought as a vision. And it was always from the start, the idea was that the C20, all the working groups, we would not just be building policy, but definitely would be action-oriented. And because of Amma's vision, we could also channel the efforts from the start on what was useful globally and within India. And so as part of engagement, we had over 16,000 participants from 104 countries. More than 5,000 were international. It also included a lot of outreach activities within villages, and we had a lot of youth participations also. It was a combination, I would say, of education for life. That is something that is propagated by Amma. And when we talk about education, every single working group that you see here did the awareness and education in their own areas to the community. So I would say education was definitely not limited to this working group, but for health, or if you go for cybersecurity awareness, or if you go for gender equality, that component of awareness, which is part of education for life, was done by all the working groups. And it was done with not only students and academic institutes, but a lot of youth across India and globally.
That's incredible. And that's something I'm going to get to towards the end. That's education is a part of it. Health in every area is a part of it. Technology connects all of us. And Dr. Bhavani, I'm coming to you next. Gender equality and women's empowerment. I think Amma holding the position of the chair for civil society is it speaks a lot, because she's bringing that female perspective and female leadership. When you talk about compassion, these are some of the qualities we don't really see in today's leadership, because it's more masculine leadership, but we need that feminine leadership to really bring the heart out of it, to really understand and connect with people. And when we talk about gender equality and women's empowerment, and that's what we are. Power of Women is also, that's where we're working, we're collaborating with your working group. It's more than just women. I mean, Amma is so inclusive of everyone as the chair. And that's what we are about too. I mean, we are so inspired by her way of doing work. It's inclusive of that women don't leave anybody behind as mothers. I mean, Amma literally means mother. So can you please share a little bit of your insight on this working group?
I think you've pretty much stolen the words from my mouth, Shanali. It's exactly what you're saying. I mean, when you talk about Amma, it's not about gender as a binary. It transcends gender. And when you start with compassion and end with compassion, you are all inclusive. It's just exactly the same things that you were saying, Dr. Krishna was saying, Dr. Priya was saying, Dr. Prema was saying. You can just boil that entire thing down to this compassion based approach. And whether it's gender, whether it's any kind of inequality, any kind of diversity, any kind of inclusion. And like you said, motherhood doesn't exclude anyone. It talks about all of us moving together equally. So in that sense, you take the gender conversation beyond gender even, but it impacts gender in a very large way because we do have women as half, and it's one of the largest diverse groups that there is. But in, like you said, I mean, I don't have to just repeat everything, but exactly. I think we all understand it and we see it, that this is what has been so different, dramatically different about the C20 leadership in India this year. That's been the second thing that I would say is, again, compassion is actually not just an attitude, it's an action word. Compassion has to have action built into it, which is why, again, Amma's insistence that we don't keep this to meetings, we don't keep this to talking, but we make sure that it translates actually into action. How in action? Everybody is on the table. Like you said, it was not some kind of a G20 exclusive club. G20 in itself is exclusive. We made sure that C20 was not exclusive in any which way. So everybody across the table was invited. Everybody was sent letters to anybody who wanted to participate, could be a part of it. So it was not just the few really super large international NGOs that were holding the conversations, but it was people who have never even heard of G20 that were actually becoming a part of the conversation. So that kind of inclusivity, acting on things, whether it's in terms of education or in terms of physical activity. So the amount of outreach that was done, it's also the tagline is you are the light, means you are the change, you embody that change. So you had to make sure that this was an action-based thing. It is not a talking-based set of events. And so the amount of outreach we have, I think we're close to, from the numbers that we have collected, which is only the ones that we managed to keep track of, we've hit at least 4 million people in direct impact. So I'm not even talking about the indirect impact of just combined of all the working groups, not just the 4 that are represented over here. But also what in terms of action is learning from action. So we were very exclusive in the sense that we made sure that we brought lessons from the grassroots level. Why is policy failing? What is it that we really need to make policy work? We have beautiful policies in India. Why isn't our country perfect and idealistic? Because the policies fail when they come to implementation. Where are the gaps? Why is action actually not happening? So bring those lessons, put it back into policies so that we can make actually policy effective. These are all things that made the C20 so different. The other thing that Dr. Prema said is that we had so much conversation amongst ourselves. And we realized everything is cross-cutting. Gender is a part of every conversation. It's a part of health. It's a part of technology. It's a part of education. Education is a part of every conversation. So there is a huge system that we're talking. So we really have to approach this in a systems perspective. Again, that's a very feminine approach. You don't silo down. You kind of take the conversation together. And these are, I think, that were the most beautiful, really enriching parts of the entire C20 conversation. And like Amma says, it starts and ends with compassion. Anything short of that you fail in the real objectives that any working group wants to meet. None of the SDGs would really happen if you didn't have compassion. It's like the missing SDG.
Absolutely. And like you said, I took the words out of your mouth. I think some of the things you said is what I was thinking in my head. So that was very amazing, Dr. Bhavani. I think what you said, I want to go back to compassion and the leadership of Amma that she brought. I mean, again, to reiterate, I feel like I'm a part of the younger generation that's really looking, hey, what can we do? How can we be a part of taking action? Because it feels so unapproachable because it's very exclusive for the most part. But now it's more like, I mean, we can't keep it exclusive. It's impacting the climate crisis, is impacting every single one of us. Gender, technology is connecting every single one of us. We are in so many different places from in this world, like North America, Asia. We're all joining from different places, and education is the underlying component of it all. And Amma itself, she brings that inclusivity, because I met her once, maybe 10 years ago in Los Angeles. And, she's known as Hugging Amma because she really hugs you. When she sees you, she hugs you. And that's what she's known. And I met her for the first time in LA. And I was like, wow, that in itself is compassion and love. That's a feminine quality. Although feminine is not exclusive for women, because feminine, we all have masculine and feminine tendencies. That's something I know India really embraces, even with the way Hinduism is. Not to make it religious, but it's more like you see that in the gods of Hinduism, how both are embraced. And that's where my next question goes to, because taking action. So to take action, we need to know what the policies are. And I think, Dr. Priya, you said it, the fact that all of you came together, and I think all of you said this, was in itself a change, because us coming together in collaboration, not leaving anybody behind, that inclusivity, because all these groups tend to work in silos, but y'all really just brought it together and let's have high-level conversations because they all impact each other. So what are the policy recommendations? Whether they're going to affect or not, they still came out because you all came together. And what are some of these policy recommendations each of these groups can share with us? And then we'll go into the real action. How can we implement it? If it makes sense in our region, how can we implement? So one of you please start. Maybe Dr. Bhavani, you can go first with some of the policy recommendations that were implemented, or rather is submitted.
Sure. I'd like to categorize that into two kinds of policy recommendations. So one is the kind of policy recommendations that make the policy work. So even to have policy working, you need to have certain things in place. And so those were the cross-cutting policy recommendations, things that many groups had identified was critical. It's not really specific to either gender equality or education or a single piece of cross-cutting policies. A very typical example of a cross-cutting policy is the need for data, good data, disaggregated data. Especially in terms of gender, we don't have good disaggregated data. So this impacts policies in health, policies in education, policies in technology. We know about gender biases in artificial intelligence. So everywhere this recommendation comes up that you need to have good data. So we had cross-cutting data that was specific to policies, but we also had very specific working group related policies. So in terms of women's economic empowerment, women's health, everything has an aspect that ties into another working group because it is a system. But there were very specific recommendations in terms of gender and very specific recommendations in terms of cross-cutting. I think I'll keep it general over here because I'm sure the specifics will come from the other working groups, if that's okay. I can come back to it later on, the specifics of gender equality.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Bhavani, for sharing that. I see, like we all said this, there's a connection here. Gender equality and women's empowerment is amplifying the voices. So that's broadening the narrative. And then that's a part of education because you have to educate each other. And then we have technology that really allows you to collect data, also disseminate information much faster than ever before. just like we are talking here, we are using technology. And Dr. Priya, which your working group is holistic health, which impacts all areas of well-being, us being connected and coming. So, Dr. Prema, if you can talk about a little bit about education and what kind of policies we are discussing here, the recommendations.
So, yes, the education group recommended an integrated approach that promotes holistic education, which is grounded in life skills and global citizenship. Sorry, I just lost my power, but I'm on a UPS. Okay. I'll repeat it. The Education Working Group recommended an integrated approach that promotes holistic education, which combines both education for life skills and global citizenship. Now, global citizenship education was emphasized in the C20 2021 policy from Italy. But in the Indian policy, we propose taking this to the next level called Education for Life. And that basically has two goals. One is to build compassionate youth who serve society, and also building resilience in the mind of the youth so that they can face difficulties easily, and overcome them. And this could be through practices such as meditation or better understanding of how to deal with them. And then it extends this holistic paradigm to persons with disabilities. So especially children, early identification, swift intervention, and also sensitizing the entire community because there's a lot of stigma involved. And finally, we advocate for digital accessibility, inclusive financing models to support skill development, capacity building. Education in emergencies was something we found later because it didn't happen that much in India. But what we found from our international audience is that the average time that a refugee spends in a camp is 17 years. And so this became a big theme. Recommendations included comprehensive training, localized emergency curriculum, continuous development for teachers and community to be able to manage during emergencies. And then our last sub-theme was digital transformation and accessibility. So here we looked at human-centered design, bridging the digital divide. We launched multiple projects from digital transformation that were offered to society in education, integrative health. But the most satisfying one was something we did for outside India. And this was called Amrita Kutumbakam. It connects CSOs and NGOs with the refugee camps that they offer, that they serve. And it's being implemented in different countries such as Uganda, Tanzania, Greece, South Sudan. And it expands the options of displaced people and refugees and the NGOs and CSOs that want to help them. They know where the refugees are, what they need within the camp, and the refugees know where to find the services from the CSOs. And this is actually now available in almost 50 countries, and we have a lot of volunteers who have taken this up.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm going to get back to what you shared as well. And going back to technology, one of the problems, I have been having conversations with, people who I am talking to, my age group, stuck in between millennials and Gen Z. One of the things that's problematic we see is there's not enough discussion. So what you are sharing is just that data, that knowledge. When you have an open conversation, you can actually find out about what everybody's going through, what's happening in the world, instead of working in silos. And with technology being now the centerpiece of really connecting the entire world together, being able to really come from like Uganda to, being able to connect 50 to 50 countries and their refugee camps. I mean, that's a big number. We were not able to do that maybe 2-3 decades ago. And Dr. Krishna Shri, if you can really talk about a couple of things, policy recommendations, and how technology is playing such a crucial role that can bridge the gap of so many things that's going on in the world to bring solutions with everything you're doing, really. Because another breakdown is dissemination of information, because not a lot of people have access to the information y'all are speaking, y'all are presenting the policy recommendations. So how, if you can share about how that relates to with the policy recommendations you have been working, and how we can be connected and disseminate information as well at the same time.
Right. So thank you, Shonali. So just continuing on the thread that my other colleagues have mentioned, I think the way we looked at technology and technology policy recommendations were using two specific directions. One is, like you mentioned, how much enhancement technology has made in empowering people. So that's a very, very important aspect of technology. But the second is also the fact that we cannot deny is that technology has also made us increasingly vulnerable. And how do we really prevent that? So these two were, you could say, the foundation for all of our policy recommendations. So definitely the accessibility, the availability that, like Dr. Prema mentioned, are extremely important to be able to get everybody on board, to be able to use the potential of technology. And it has changed all of our lives. Today, we cannot even think of living without using technology for sure. However, there's a significant number of us in the world that do not actually have any of this access. And so education actually plays an important role. And the way we looked at it is we looked at two cross-cutting recommendations. One was education on emerging technologies. It's not about using a phone to really dial a number, but really how can you really use that phone to really improve potentially the reach of your business, for example, and what does that really involve? So like Dr. Bhavani mentioned, artificial intelligence, it's already part of our daily lives. This year was a huge paradigm shift that we saw in use of technology by actually laymen and on lay citizens in making decisions, in looking at getting information, etc. So one is that the education of these emerging technologies for beneficial use and mitigation of potential harm, both of these are equally important. And you can only do that with digital upskilling, training programs, and really bringing in that collaboration required between private, civil society sectors, etc., and really increase competency amongst people. The second was really related to how can we make ourselves less vulnerable, or the entire civil society or every civilian less vulnerable. And that can also be only possible through proper collaboration between various different stakeholders and countries. And we talk about, say, digital economy, we are expecting it to be $21 trillion in a couple of years, but half of it we expect will be spent on just combating crime, technology-related crime. And so we worry that we may be progressing very fast in terms of technology, space, but we may be also spending a lot of effort and resources towards keeping ourselves safe. So the good news is that 98% of potential, vulnerabilities can be somewhat eradicated with use of proper hygiene techniques. And we find that youth are going to be the potential torchbearers in this effort. So they will play a continuous and important role in this effort. So that kind of sums up the approach we took towards policies. And we had 4 verticals. We looked at security. We looked at AI and data for society, like Dr. Bhavani mentioned. We looked at disinformation. For example, today there's a lot of information out there, but it's hard to really understand what is really true and what is not. And COVID was a perfect example of how there were a lot of conspiracy theories around vaccination and things like that really affected people. And there was also lots of lives lost because of disinformation. So all of these really form the basis for our policy recommendations in technology.
Thank you so much, Dr. Krishna Shri. One of the things I want to address is I have heard this quote before. Electricity can cook a man a meal and light up the room, as well as if it's misused, it can cook the man, electrify the man. So I think what the technology, that's what we are dealing with. It's a matter of how are we going to be using technology. Because when you're talking about AI, security, and misinformation, I mean, it still can enhance, do exactly what we are doing, connect the entire world, give us the right education, what Dr. Prema was saying, I mean, really disseminate the information that needs in a holistic way. I mean, whatever has been happening doesn't work anymore. The way we consume information is very different. I mean, most of the world, the developed countries are on the internet using technology in various forms, and especially AI. AI is not something outside of us. It's a feedback loop that whatever the entire global population is plugging in is what it's giving back to us. So just being aware of that, and I think technology plays such a crucial role. Now going back to Dr. Priya with health, holistic health. I mean, at Power of Women too, we have 7 areas of health and well-being. We talk about physical, psychological, emotional, social, spiritual, economical, and environmental. All of these play a role. They all are interconnected, play a role in our individual well-being and our society's well-being and how we are doing. So going to you, Dr. Priya, we see such a connection here. I love that you're all working together at that high level because that's so crucial. Going to holistic health, what kind of policy recommendations have you all put forth, and also consider, I mean, taking into account emotional well-being and physical, mental well-being among everything, economical, environmental. So if you can share some insights with us.
Thank you, Shanali. So from the name of our working group was Integrated Holistic Health, Mind, Body, and Environment. And I think that that's where we drew our foundation for this particular working group. Because when we talk about health, first of all, even the WHO has moved the concept of health from being an absence of disease into actually a feeling of well-being, both mental, physical, social, and emotional. So we wanted to emphasize aspects of health policy that moved away from the individual human being's health to understanding that our health is not only dependent on our immediate family, our society, our country, our species, but even the entire world. It affects each and every one of our individual person's health. So health is a huge topic, and we were completely flooded by issues and problem statements that people wanted to share. But I think, first of all, the overwhelming majority or the largest push was for mental health. It's very sad that even today, 40% of the countries in the world have no mental health policy. The definition of what constitutes a mental health condition, even that's not clear when it comes from a medical, political policy standpoint. Simple things like understanding that mental health cannot be standardized. It's different for different people. It's different for women. It's different for men. It's different in different parts of the world, different races. So many social cultural aspects affect mental health. And the fact that isn't even mental health care and support is not available in 80% of the hospitals, 80% of healthcare facilities in third world countries is something that is almost unforgivable today, considering that, we've progressed as a society. So reinforcing the requirement for having mental health care facilities and support and manpower available at community healthcare centers, and having community involvement to help overcoming the stigma. There's so much stigma. There's so much fear. Even today, people are thrown out of their workplaces when they say they feel stressed. I mean, every 10 seconds, somebody commits suicide in the world. And the fact that most countries, even today, have no suicide hotline. Even in India, there is no suicide hotline that's, a central suicide hotline. These are really heartbreaking statistics. So our predominant policy recommendation was to ensure that mental health policies are in place in all countries. Actually, it's surprising. Over the last 3 years, naturally, the entire discussion on health has been on COVID-19. But since its very inception, mental health has never featured in G20 healthcare discussions ever. So that was one thing we were very passionate about, that we bring in mental health, not only dealing with the treatment aspect, but also how to enhance wellness. So things that are considered as esoteric or very traditional, something as simple as meditation, ensuring that from a very young age, children are trained on coping mechanisms. We were just talking about technology. I mean, even infants, to make them stop crying, we put them in front of a phone. And this digital addiction of sorts is constantly making our mind run, that the silence of just letting your mind rest doesn't happen other than when we're fast asleep. And even sleep doesn't happen so much nowadays. So the importance of mental wellness techniques, something as simple, we did a campaign internationally called the 999 campaign, it started off with schools where we wanted to challenge kids. Can you do 9 days straight of 9 minutes of meditation? That's it. Just 9 minutes of being silent, and 9 minutes, 9 rounds of Surya Namaskar, which is a exercise that it's quite active, and it's a cycle of yoga that really makes you focus for those 10-15 minutes that you're doing it. And we had more than 2.5 million people worldwide complete this challenge, and it was incredible to see these little children. They gave their testimonials after they did nine days of this, and even a child could sense the difference that they felt when they had just 9 minutes of meditation, and that it actually requires training to be able to sit silently. And the amount of wellness that you feel, these seem like small things, but our world is facing the largest mental health pandemic, far larger than anything COVID did to us. And we pushed that as our primary policy. Our second one was One Health. One Health is basically a concept wherein we recognize that when we talk about disease prevention, we cannot only prevent disease in human beings. We have to ensure the health of animals as well. If you take COVID-19, we all know, everybody knew it started from bats. You take tuberculosis, there's a huge campaign to eradicate TB by 2030. And now, way late, this started 15 years ago. And now we're realizing that it doesn't matter how many drugs you give to human beings if you don't treat cattle, if you don't protect our livestock, if we don't prevent spread of disease in our forests. We're not an individual species on Earth. The health of our plants, the health of our animals, it's not only about our pets, but everything. That's going to affect each and every health communicable disease eradication program we ever try to plan and strategize. So to come up with a One Health framework, whenever we put in money and manpower and effort into preventative programs, that was our second policy recommendation. And the third was to recognize that my health today actually is determined by the health of my mother when she was pregnant with me. My health, if I become a diabetic when I'm 60 years old, today, non-communicable diseases is the cause of 70 to 80% of death in the world. And that is determined 70 years ago from when your mother had you in her uterus. So when we conceptualize how to prevent or reduce the burden of non-communicable disease, it has to start from the health of our mothers. It has to start from the health of women when they begin their reproductive cycle. And when we say health, it's not just physical health, it's their mental health, emotional health, social health, to recognize that even as an individual, we are of our parents and our children are of us, and our health it's not just about spreading a flu, but that continuity that even the cancers I get later in life is dependent upon what I did as an infant, how I lived my lifestyle as a child, and ensuring that we are trained in lifestyle management from a school age. Our mothers are trained in lifestyle management from when they're young, so that that cycle can perpetuate, and hopefully maybe 20, 30 years down the line, we can finally begin to reduce the burden of non-communicable diseases. Because I think at the rate our population growth is going, achieving universal health coverage is never going to happen if we don't start to reduce the burden of disease. So prevention and how to ensure preventative management will begin from way back in our life, almost before we were even conceptualized. So these were our three main policy recommendations.
Wow. I mean, you connected it back to all other working groups in such a beautiful way, Dr. Priya. I want to address some things because I think you connected to technology, education, and gender, all three of them with holistic health. I think that's so special about C20. That's something very special. That's that interconnectedness, collaboration. So I want to address the first part, mental well-being. I think we're so used to as a society, because if we cannot see it with our own eyes, we think it doesn't exist. So that's one of the biggest problems that we are experiencing. And technology has a huge role to play in this. Again, you said when a kid is crying, you put an iPad in front of them, hoping they will be watching something and stop crying. And what are they consuming? I mean, that's why we are doing Power of Women, edutainment in the sense having wholesome, educational, informative content. And it doesn't have to be this boring content. It can be entertaining, but at the same time, being conscious of the content we are consuming. And that has a huge role to play with our mental well-being, with social media coming up with filters. And we are constantly scrolling through, and we are seeing the highlight of every person's day. We don't see their entire life, but we only see their best moment that they decide to share with the world. And we tend to, without awareness, we tend to compare our lives to that. And then now that comes back to meditation. And meditation is such a huge word. Like I have noticed, especially living in Los Angeles, it's different. California is different than other countries or other states. But because they love yoga, they love to, meditate, be very spiritual. But, meditation in itself has become this unattainable thing people don't understand. But I personally feel like it's simply breathing. Breathing is the most fundamental component of meditation. And we all need food. And we can go maybe a few weeks without food. Without water, we can go with a few days, but without air to breathe, we can't really go on average more than 5 minutes. And that's the most fundamental component. That's your life is a meditation at that point. And I think that needs to be very much highlighted as well. And the other thing you said, our health depends on everything, the environment, the social, the education. So how I want to say, I think education is such a huge component, using technology to disseminate. And then going back to what you said about mothers, this is where gender equality and women's empowerment come. Mothers are our most valuable species on this planet. It's not even about a gender at this point. It's just nature that reproduces, that actually keeps passing the seed on, taking care of the mothers who is raising the next generation. Really, this is so important. And I want to go now into, because I know we're running out of time, I want to go into implementation of these incredible work you all have been doing for the past year and then will continue to carry on with compassion and love, that feminine leadership incorporated. What is it that we can immediately take? I think you already mentioned some amazing things. And Dr. Bhavani, you can start, like, what is it that you and I can start today? Not waiting for the world to change, but taking accountability for ourselves. How can I, as a person, be a part of changing myself so that I can be a part of the collective?
It's an individual decision to be a part and to make that change yourself. It does help to be in the right company, to be listening to the right things, but it's really an individual's decision. Like Amma says, even happiness is a decision. You decide to be happy. What the youth can do, and I'm not talking about an individual, I'm talking about a collective, right? Is definitely to make themselves more aware of these conversations. What I feel, and if it's okay if I may digress from your actual question, this is something that I found a little lacking overall in the way the C20, the G20 is set up, and is our understanding of how we can actually contribute to policy. You can be a part of an action, you can join a local NGO, you can just do the best that you can as a human being, it's all fine. You can educate yourself, you can make the right decisions, but to have an impact at a global level from the individual to the policy is something, those steps are not very clear. Even with the entire C20 process, it's what we really found missing is the lack of understanding of how the individual can actually contribute to a policy making decision and environment. So we both need to have the institutions that can facilitate it, but also the knowledge dissemination among people of how their experiences and their knowledge of the systems at the grassroots level can actually contribute to policy making. So very strong education, knowledge dissemination at the grassroots level on how an individual can actually be a part of policy making, but also put institutions in place that can bring these voices into policy. This I still feel is a huge gap in the entire in the way any nation works in building its policies. They usually sublet it to some think tanks, and people's participation in policy making we know is important, but there are not the right mechanisms for it as yet. This is what I feel is still missing, the link between the individual and policy. What you can do is anybody can do. It's up to how inspired you are in this decision that you make and the responsibility that you feel as a part of being the whole. It takes every one of us to make this world a better place.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bhavani. And when I say you and I think that applies to every single one of us because we are all carrying that I perspective. So I really wanted to talk about, yes, what is it that we can take? I think education wise to Dr. Prema, what is it that the youth, every individual that's watching this, if they come across this content randomly, what is it that we can do to be a part of implementing, even if they don't get adopted, these policy recommendations? How can we be a part of it? Really stand up and say, hey, I want to do something.
I believe you need to be part of, the youth should be part of a collective. And I would give Amma's Ayudh, which is a global youth wing, founded in 1985, as an example. It is there in, I believe, over 40 countries. Ayudh Europe has 5,000 members. They have done over 15 projects by the European Union, and they have 50 local civic engagements annually across Europe. And so what we had done as part of C20 was we worked with Ayudh in two ways. With Ayudh India, we engaged in the youth, and we had sessions with global citizenship through service learning. They looked at the Indian Gurukula system, heritage, ancient culture, etc. And then another thing we did that was really interesting and that I believe youth can take forward is organizing multiple youth parliaments. And this was again in collaboration with Ayuth chapters in India and outside India. And youth from each region or country did the research to identify the problems in their regions, propose the solutions, propose the policies and the best practices. And we had over 35 countries participate. And we only gave them 4 or 5 minutes to present during an online parliament, and there were awards. We had invited experts, and finally, at the end of each youth parliament, they signed a joint declaration. So that's the closest thing, I think, where they have done their research and they have identified solutions and they have proposed policy recommendations with experts involved. And this is really something that all youth organizations can do. It also there's also a peer influence. So instead of doing drugs together, you could be doing something that is useful for society and building your own character together as youth.
That's so wonderful. And I think we should put more information about our youth as well as a starting point. If somebody wants to take part, that's in 40 countries. So thank you so much, Dr. Prema. And Dr. Krishnashree, do you have anything to share in terms of implementing? Because I think technology is such a crucial component. And how can youth be a part?
Sure. I think I think to a broad extent, the way I would look at it is that engagement to improve technology platforms is, in some ways that youth can really participate in. It is a continual process, of course. Promoting digital literacy amongst your peers and communities, encouraging responsible use of digital platforms and educating others on how to identify potential harm or combating disinformation. These are some approaches one could take. Of course, thought leadership, having visible and vocal platforms to be able to showcase, your opinions, and seeking support from global organizations are some ways also towards, how we can work towards some success. I also feel that even if we as individuals are not directly affected by, say, technology-related vulnerabilities, but feel strongly about their detrimental impact, I think our knowledge of potential harm should be discussed and published in media too, to raise awareness. And one of the things Amma always says is, no matter what you do and who you are, you always end up being a role model for somebody else. So keeping that in mind itself would be an inspiration for you to take the right course of action, to pull together and bring a community approach towards discussing and also solving problems. So those are some of the things I feel that people can participate in.
I think one of the questions that goes back is, what is the starting point for us? Where do we start to do this? I don't know if any of you can answer it as well. I don't want it to be just you. And when Dr. Priya speaks as well, what is the starting point of implementing? Where can we go find them? Because I know personally, we have to sometimes really have that passion to go Google it or find it. But where can we get started? Is C20, the website, a good place to start?
Absolutely. There is a lot of material. In fact, a lot of the initiatives what Dr. Priya discussed, what Dr. Prema mentioned, what Dr. Bhavani mentioned, all of these are initiatives that have been started as part of Civil 20. Even participating in any of these activities that are continually ongoing would be a great starting point. A lot of materials have been built. Ecosystem and partners are already engaged. So that would be a great starting point. And I think when you take that first step, you will see that domino effect for certain, as what our experience has told us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Krishnashree. I think that's very important. And we will make sure through Power of Women, we actually highlight all those resources. And Dr. Priya, I think you can really wrap up and take your time to please share what is it that we can do to implement, because it's about implementation, because there are packs and packs of policy recommendations that have been done for all these years. What can we do? Where can we go to find these resources? And what are some practical implementation actions we can take?
It's a loaded question. I think that, like you very rightly said, even before the C20 process, even Dr. Bhavani mentioned this before, there is so much information out there, whether it is from governmental organizations like the WHO, whether it's from fantastic NGOs all over the world. Information is available, but like Amma says, at the end of the day, no matter how many organizations or how many systems we put in place, we have to dare to be the change. And human beings are communal beings. We live in communities. Our behaviors are influenced and shaped by those that we see around us. And that is especially important for youth. You know, you're trying to understand who you are, you're forming your personality. And Amma very beautifully puts it, well, each and every one of us is a role model, whether we realize it or not. Somebody else is looking up to us for inspiration. So recognizing that we have the power to actually change not only our own lives, but others, the individual has to dare to step out of pre-existing habits, pre-existing norms. Take, for example, mental health. We have to dare to talk about it. We have to dare to be open about it. Or you take something like menstrual hygiene that everybody is afraid to speak about. Nobody, schools don't want to teach children. There's strange preconceived ideas that it's going to ruin innocence. But even if that is what our immediate society says, we dare to be the change that we want to see in society. We open up and speak about it. And the power that we have to actually influence what is going on around us is so incredible. We just don't realize it. So I think the change has to start from youth. I think education is so important, and there are so many resources, and for sure it's our responsibility to direct youth towards the correct resources. But I think more than anything, it's empowering them to recognize that if they decide to speak about it, if they decide that I'm going to do 9 minutes of meditation in my school, others will see them and others will eventually want to understand more and learn more. And that's actually how lasting change happens. I think that the power of an individual is actually so much more than the power of any policy. So I think that is also the reason why Amma had emphasized so much that while you should focus on policy making as well, also ensure that empowering the next generation, empowering societies, villages, grassroots workers is as or even maybe more important than the actual policy building, because we have to be able to change our own. We are the future governments. We are the people that are going to create our future. So, yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Priya. And I want to say something. All of you being here, thank you so much. I think it's very important we collaborate. You all have created a safe space for everybody to feel included and inclusive. And we at Power of Women, we want with this collaboration to carry the work you have done, incorporate into edutainment so the youth can actually know where to get started. So that's one of the things we're in the works, and we're also actually collaborating with our youth as well. So that can be a starting point for any youth around the world to look what our youth is and see where, if you don't know where to start, look it up. And this is a point of a starting point. And we work with the Brahma Kumaris as well. It's again a female run organization. And so both females and males. But I think starting points, you have already given that space. And I think that's what we all need to do, give these solutions or these resources as a starting point. If anybody who is watching this do not know where to start or how to begin. And in the closing, I would like for each and every one of you to share a couple of words very quickly in the closing. And thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate all the incredible work you have done and paved the path for all of us. And thank you so much. And Dr. Bhavani, do you want to go first?
Why don't I go last?
Okay. Who wants to go first? It can be any one of you. All of you, there's so much interconnectedness. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things that y'all showed through C20 working groups. Everybody's interconnected. It's not working in silos. It's about collaboration. Everything goes hand in hand. So Dr. Krishna Sri, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. I just wanted to thank you for this beautiful opportunity to really showcase our thoughts. Personally, I just wanted to say that there's a lot that I learned in this process that really brought out the immensity to a large extent, the team from that work with us all over the world. The types of information that many civil society organizations shared really enriched the entire process, and I really credit the work that we have done to them as well, because they are doing the hard work on the ground, and to be, to take time to be able to notice that work and, present that work really, and the courage that they really showcased was really extraordinary as well. So I really thank, the G20 countries for providing this platform, but also I think the Civil 20 leadership and entirety for making this a life-changing experience.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Prema, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'll just end with a quote that underlies the theme for all the working groups and Amma's vision. Our heart is like a parachute, and it's very dangerous if it does not open. So let's work towards that.
Wow, that's powerful. I mean, again, that's bringing that compassion and love. I love that. And Dr. Priya, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think that I want to share in Dr. Krishna Shri's sentiment that the work that we were privileged to be able to see by civil society, by individuals all over, it was so inspiring. And I think that especially for youth, we are so used to hearing bad news and seeing the problems around us, but there's so much good. There's so much beauty in the work that people do to try to help those around them. And I think that in so many ways they're the greatest truth that's given in all of spirituality, that true happiness comes when you selflessly serve a person in need. That is something that is actually demonstrated every day by all of these civil society organizations and just wonderful people that want to influence positively the people around them. And I think that that if we really open our eyes to that, every moment becomes a moment of inspiration. And I hope that C20 can help bring that also to the limelight for youth to be able to just get thousands of examples of how they might be able to find that joy in selfless service as well. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautifully put. We are all a part of civil society. I think civil society encompasses all the engagement groups, in fact, because we all fall under it. So it's so important. And Dr. Bhavani, with being the coordinator of gender equality and women's empowerment, what do you have to say?
I would like to re-emphasize the C20 tagline as "You are the light," and you are the change that you seek in the world. And so we all have to take up that collective ownership for the change that we want to see. It's a huge responsibility on all of us, especially the youth. We are leaving behind, I can say I'm from the other generation, but we are leaving behind the earth field, and it's not in good shape. So it's good to look at the mistakes that we have made, come together. I do not expect anybody to do anything for you. You have to do it yourself.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Do it with compassion in your heart. You can't go wrong.
That's so beautiful. I mean, if not us, then who? And thank you so much for being here and really sharing your incredible insights. And I hope to really highlight, I mean, through Power of Women, there are so many people behind the scene that has been helping, including Miriam. I know we did it. She's not a part of the panel, who has really done so much, all of you. And Dr. Krishna Shri, when you say the NGOs are doing so much, I think all of you together, it's a collective effort that y'all are paving the path for all of us to take action, to really become aware of what's happening. So thank you so much individually for each and every single one of you, and for Amma for bringing that beautiful form of leadership that really highlights compassion and love. Thank you so much. You are the light. Thank you.
Hello. My name's Anasuya Isaacs. And I'm so grateful to be here to have this opportunity to speak with you today from my heart to yours. And I first want to celebrate that you're here. What an amazing gift that you are to us and to the world, that you would be so interested in how to make not only a difference, but the difference. So I thank you so much for being part of this wonderful inaugural program, this summit that allows you to get your well filled up, because you've probably be one of these many women who have given so much of yourself, so much of your talent, of your wisdom, your gifts, your genius. You've given it away to those who need it. You've given it in places where no one has been. You've given yourself so freely where the need has been great. So now here you are to get your well filled up. So good for you for recognizing you need it. Good for you for coming for inspiration and acknowledgement. So I am acknowledging the greatness that is you, the greatness that is in you, and the greatness that is here for you. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about one of the greatest sources in you that will keep filling your well, so that when you're miles and miles away from this program, when you're in another place, when you're in another country, when you're in service, when you're on the field, when you're in the thick of it, and it doesn't seem to be going well, or it's not going the way it's planned, or you're actually getting pushback because what you're advocating for is a little too radical, or a little too much, or a little more than they bargained for. So this is for when those moments are when you want to give up, when you think it's too hard, and when you feel it's too much. This message, remember this message, because it's for that time. What's in you is innate. It came with you like your blood came with you. It came with you like your cells came with you. It came with you like your heart came with you. What is that? Your innate divinity. Did I just say that? I sure did. Your innate divinity is in you. Innate. It's in you, it's with you, and it's always for you. That divinity I embrace as the divine sacred feminine. And the divine sacred feminine for me isn't just this abstract amorphous being somewhere else, whether it's the sky, or whether this holy temple, mosque, synagogue, any holy place. No, that innate divinity is both insentient, so it doesn't have a body, and it doesn't have a form, and it doesn't have a color or shape, but it's also sentient. And for me, it's the sentient ways that I really want to talk to you about. The sentient ways that the divine sacred feminine shows up is in people. Yeah, I said it again. Radical. I know. It's in people. Embodied. It's embodied divinity. It has to take a form so it can move and exercise in the world and bring that which we call divine: compassion, gentleness, kindness, empathy, generosity, love. we wouldn't feel any of those things if we weren't in a body to feel it, to know it, to share it. So I know that this divinity, this sentient, innate divinity is in people. And I just happen to be talking to those people who have it. Yeah, she's in you. She's coming out as you. She's beaming as you. And it's because you somehow have tapped into your innate divinity that I call the mother, that I call the great mother, that I call the divine mother. Actually, I call her a lot of things. She's Mother God. She's the divine mother. She's Mother God. I said that already. She's divine mother. I said that already. Okay, she's got lots of names, and right now I can only come up with those two. But she's also called Isis and Yemaya and Oshun and Hathor and Lakshmi and Saraswati and Durga and Kali, one of my favorite forms of her. She's also called the White Buffalo Woman. She's got so many names. Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene. She has so many names, depending on the culture, depending on the language, depending on the where. And that's because she is in everywhere and in everyone. You know, it's kind of like the yin and yang thing. There's the black dot in the white half, and then there's the white dot in the black half, because what's in is also without. We're in it and she's in it. So we're in her, just like she's in us. Huh? Well, didn't we all come from a sacred womb? Womb, that birthing place where we were carried and nurtured and fed and grown before we came into the world. Well, we were in her, the divine mother, and now she's in us. We're intricately entwined or entangled. We're cosmically entangled with our innate divinity. And as such, because you are one of those unique, beautiful, rare beings that has opened your heart, your mind, and your energies to being guided by that innate divinity, you are out here doing good work. You are actually going where Mother sends you. You're actually going to the people that she would have you go to, because she has heard their prayers. She has seen their need. She knows what they are looking for, and she's using you. I need to make sure I don't go over time. She's using you to do good work. So I'm celebrating you because you have heard the call, and you've heard the call with the ears of the divine. You've heard the call with the heart of the divine that is compassionate and will never not answer the fervent prayers of her children. You have listened to her and have taken action, and I celebrate you. So one of the things that I do, besides be a cheerleader for great women, amazing women who celebrated the divine mother, I also support women in growing their ability to hear the divine, to be led by the divine. Because, you know, right now for many people, the divine's voice is a whisper or a feeling or inclination or just a tingle. But what if you could actually hear her words out loud? What if you could actually have a conversation with her like you kind of talking to me right now? What if she was as loud as I am right now? How would your life be? How would your life be different? What more could you do? What more could you offer? Who could you be? If you were walking, knowing you were walking with, in, and for, and beside the divine mother, who is in you, but is also in everyone around you. What if you were just constantly having these ecstatic reunions, mother to mother, God to God, divine to divine, goddess to goddess? This world would be so amazingly great and have less chaos and less war and less famine and less need. Wouldn't that be the world we want to live in? I say it is. Another thing I support women in doing is removing some of the blocks that we may have experienced in our younger selves, or even last year, or even last month, where our voice got taken from us, where we were stopped from speaking, where we had our hands tied behind our backs, where we were blinded and told we better not say anything, or we shouldn't say anything, or dangerous things will happen to us if we say something. We've had those moments when our voice was stolen from us by people, by events, by circumstances, but mostly by people. My healing work is about rebirthing ourselves, putting ourselves through the womb again, so that we get to create ourselves in our own image, how we say we are, under our own name, under our own likeness. We get to rebirth ourselves in our own image, and we get to then remother ourselves, because rematriation, oh no, it's not what a C. Rematriation is our power. Remothering ourselves allows us to remother the world, because the world needs to be born again. Well, that's an hypothesis. That's my statement. The world could use some rebirthing that is free from war and greed and hierarchy. This vertical way of I'm better than you, you're better than me, all these things. Well, what if we go back to the circle, the womb, go back to the circle, how indigenous cultures actually governed before, when everybody's voice was heard, when everybody married and was equal. There was no hierarchy. It was everyone's on the same playing field in a circle, looking at one another, listening to one another, and taking everybody into consideration, including the young people, including the elders. We can rebirth that. We need to rebirth that. We need remothering. Not only remother ourselves through the healing of our traumas, but rebirthing our relationship to Mother, the earth. Rebirthing our relationship to Mother in the form of the oceans, rebirthing our relationship to Mother in the form of nature, rebirthing our relationship to Mother in the form of animals, rebirthing our to Mother in terms of the cosmos, rebirthing our relationship to Mother, source of life. We got to reconnect. We have to remember. Remember means to put back our parts. So our arm is a member, our leg is a member, our ear is a member. So to remember is to put our parts back together. So all that ways that we've been torn apart by patriarchy, white supremacy, by greed and culture, all the ways we've been torn apart, it is time to rebirth ourselves whole and complete, all our parts put back together again, so we can stand in our power, get back on our throne, be our sovereign selves, and have our voices released from bondage. No more this, no more this, no more this. Free. It's time to get free. And only we can do it. We can't keep waiting for someone else to see us and say we're worthy. We can't keep waiting for someone to acknowledge us and say, okay, you're a good person, I'm going to give you power. No, power concedes nothing without a struggle. So said Frederick Douglass, and it has been proven time and time again. We have to fight back, but we fight back with love. We fight back with rebirthing. We fight back by taking our voice back. We fight back by healing our traumas and our wounds. We fight back by loving ourselves and the world enough to push through the pain, the birthing pains, and start again. Because the earth needs us, the dolphins needs us, the trees need us, the sky needs us, the earth needs us, the babies of the future need us, our ancestors need us, our grandparents need us. We are needed now. Our whole and complete and sovereign selves, voices unleashed, heart unleashed, ready for action. We're needed. We're so needed right now. Oops. And so I celebrate you. I celebrate you, all that you are. And thank you. I thank you. And I thank you for having the courage to know that you are the one to make the difference, for having the wherewithal to gather your experiences and your talents and your genius and your education and gather it into a path that you've marked, a business that you've marked, an NGO that you've created, a nonprofit that you put into place, a movement that you have created. Thank you. Thank you for your yes. You are so needed.
Our next segment is a very special one that holds near and dear to our hearts and Power of Women. He is the individual who opened up the stage for us to do our very first public event and believed in the divine feminine rising. Our next segment is by our honored speaker, Dr. Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith. He is the founder and spiritual director of Agape International Spiritual Center in Los Angeles, California. He is a featured speaker in the film and the book, The Secret, among countless accomplishments that I do not have the space to read right now. We will always hold a very special place for him at Power of Women with immense gratitude, respect, and most of all, love. And please welcome our honored guest, Reverend Beckwith, to share his insights on divine feminine from a divine masculine perspective.
Peace and richest blessings. I am Michael B. Beckwith. It is my honor to be a part of the Power of Women digital conference. I'm honored to be here with you today. We're keenly aware, of course, during this particular time in human history, we know at some level that the universe is progressive. It is always expanding to reflect and to reveal the infinite nature of the power and the presence and the love, intelligence that governs all creation, called by millions of names, the God force, the source of all creation, the power and the presence and the love and beauty and intelligence. This universe is always expanding to reflect and reveal its nature. It's why we call it progressive. And Mother Earth herself, she too is awakening to a greater dimension of her own being. She's rising in consciousness. The frequency of the earth is rising. From a shamanic point of view, it is said by my friend Malidoma Some, who made his transition a couple of years ago, when he received his adult initiation, and Mother Earth began to talk to him, and he understood the language of the earth, and he could catch the language of the birds and the animals. Mother Earth said to him that her vibration had increased, and she was waiting for humanity to catch up. And that those beings that caught up would go through the transitional stage that we're all growing through with a greater ease than those who were stuck in resistance. the ramification of this rise in vibrational frequency, the ramification of the expansion of this multidimensional progressive universe is the rising up of the feminine. Rising up of the feminine that has been suppressed by the patriarchy for decades and years and years and years. And we see that rising up now. We see the vibration of the feminine energy rising up in the power of women all over the world. We can look at the lightning rod in Iran. We can look at the vibrational frequency of this rising up in the countries on the continent of Africa and India and all over the world. The rise of this dynamic is occurring. And as this rise is happening, this feminine energy is rising up, it is not being curated by hypermasculinity. The women aren't becoming more masculine. The feminine energy is not becoming more masculine. It's becoming the full expression of life with the qualities of intelligence, the qualities of love and beauty and caretaking and strength and a vitalizing energy that's more of a balanced frequency. So all that has been suppressed is now being unleashed in a very powerful and wonderful way. Now, this energy that's rising up and this awakening consciousness is not just freeing women, it's also freeing men. The men who have been brought up in this hyper-masculine pseudo-power. It's also freeing men. They've lived under the burden of an imbalanced energy within them, and it's taken on roles that not only has led to suppression, but has led to hypermasculinity, has embraced pseudo power. Do you realize that men over 50 have a 4 times higher rate of suicide than women? There's something to be said by that. That men, because of this imbalancing of energy within them, has taken on the role of not only hypermasculinity, but taken on the role of a power that's not a real power, it's a pseudo power. Control, manipulation, mismanagement that has led to so many men feeling bereft, cut adrift from the real power that's within them, the balancing of those frequencies, and a much higher rate of suicide and suicidal attempts. So today, as we're celebrating the power of women, as we're celebrating the power of the rise of this feminine energy, we're also embracing the freedom of not only women, but we're finally embracing the freedom of men who are no longer carry the burden of this kind of living cut adrift from real power. The balancing of the energies in men and women, in every individual that comes to the planet. So today, as people are gathered all around the world on this digital conference, feeling this intensity of the rise of our planet, Mother Earth, and the expansion of our multidimensional progressive universe, we're saying in substance that we're yielding and allowing, letting and surrendering to an energy that, when allowed, allows for the real power to occur. For so long, the masculine energy has dominated, which sounds like making something happen with force, manipulation, and moving into a frequency of allowing and letting and receiving and becoming available and surrendering to something that's happening cosmically. To move from making something happen, domination, manipulation, and control, to allowing something to happen, feminine letting, feminine allowing, feminine availability, feminine receiving, that allows for the divine and perfect spiritual idea in the idea sphere that is everywhere to be birthed, in all of us, that we become midwives of something so magnificent, the balancing of this energy and the rise of the feminine. The moment that the earth woke up and is still waking up, the patriarchal energy was doomed. That which has been suppressing the feminine, doomed. And now the masculine and the feminine can be in partnership, balancing each other, that we can now co-create a world that works for the highest and best within us all. And so I celebrate the rise of the feminine. I celebrate us waking up to the rebalancing of this energy, the reawakening of the feminine, because there was a time on the planet where the matriarchy ruled until it was suppressed by fear-based masculinity. But it's reawakening now, but not to the degree of banishing the masculine energy, but embracing it. So there's a cultivation of balance that leads to love and intelligence, beauty, creativity, generosity, and so much more. It's my joy just to say these few words and to say I stand in celebration of this moment that we see springing up all over the world. The genie is out the box. It's not going back in. Life and the ability to see a world in which the honoring of Mother Earth, the honoring of the sacred feminine is now being embraced by more and more beings. This is our moment for all of humanity to say yes to more than we ever thought we can be. Both wings, masculine and feminine, flying together. Not just one wing, masculine suppressing the feminine. Not just one wing, the feminine denying the masculine. But both together, rising in a great awareness that there is a world that we can begin to see that works for the highest and best within us all, with a full awareness that the planet and the world are two different things. The planet is Mother Earth, Gaia, rainforests, rivers, lakes, oceans, mountain ranges, earth that is sacred. And the world is a perception, opinions, points of view that have condensed themselves into experience. Today, all of you gathered here, you're changing the world and the worldview. And the condensation of separation of masculine and feminine is ending. You're creating a whole new vibratory world that will now be anchored through our thought, our word, and our deeds. We're rising together, here and now. The power of women. I'm so glad that I had a beautiful, magnificent, generous, creative, intelligent, loving mother that taught me to treat women as if they were my sisters, my aunties, or my grandmothers, and to hold that space. And so I offer this prayer. We turn within in this moment and we just give something. What do we give? We give thanks. We give thanks to the great God, Goddess of the universe that is everywhere in its fullness, that by means of us wants to become conscious of itself as our very life and being. We give thanks for our life. We give thanks for the gift of living. In this consciousness of thanksgiving, our perceptual windows are cleansed and cleared, and we see clearly now That we're one with this presence, Mother, Father, God, infinite spirit, with one with the presence. There's never an absence. And the vibrational word that is being spoken is an announcement, a declaration, a decree, naming this conference magnificent, naming our time together wonderful, uplifting, inspiring, and a word that is a law of elimination to anything that would hinder the healing and the revelation of the truth of the power of the feminine, power of women. And from this moment on, every single thing is working together for our individual and for our collective good. I feel it in my bones. And we here in the Agape International community hold sacred not only this gathering, we hold sacred Mother Earth. We hold sacred the feminine energy whose time has come to reassert itself on the vibrational throne, revealing compassion and intelligence, love, kindness, and intelligence on earth as it is in the heart mind of the infinite. It's all happening now. Give thanks for this and allow it to be so. And so it is. Amen, Amen, and Ashe. Peace and dynamic blessings to you. Thank you for the invitation to speak a few words into this wonderful conference that ramifications of all that will be discussed, dialogued about, will ripple and become a cosmic butterfly effect all over the entire planet and beyond. Have a bright and beautiful day, afternoon, and evening. Peace and blessings.
Hello, Shelley. Welcome to the Power of Women Digital Conference. We're so thrilled to have you here today.
Thanks very much, Anali. Wonderful to be here to talk about change and impact we all can do together.
Thank you. So let's dive right in. And you, as the founder of She the People, tell us, what does sisterhood economy mean to you?
You know, India's constitution's preamble begins with the three powerful words, we the people. And I would ask myself that how can we have we the people succeed without the power of she the people? A country of 1.4 billion people, 50% are women. By that logic, we should have 50% of the opportunity, 50% of the vote, 50% of the voice. But we don't. And I would always wonder why. And then I started looking for answers. I mean, just look at 750 million Indian women. We are not just a part of India. We're 10% of the world. We're twice the size of United States, 3 times the size of Brazil, 8 times the size of Japan, and I'm still talking about Indian women. Are we a number or are we a force? And therefore, I would ask myself that what holds us back from accessing opportunities, from turning them into, economic ways forward? How do we as women get together and say, hey, you know what, I have your back. Go follow your dream. What's your ambition? Let me help you out. Let's ensure we don't reinvent the wheel ourselves when we have other women to help us get on with the road much faster. So all those questions were literally sort of bustling my mind into getting a book together. And that was the genesis of the book that I recently wrote and called it Sisterhood Economy, saying that if the rest of the world has constantly fed us that idea that women are another woman's worst enemy, can we change this? Can we change the cultural context in which patriarchy has fed us this systemic problem and reverse it and say, I'm going to change the world. I will raise my hand. I will push my way in. I will get that opportunity and I will create change. I think that's how the idea of sisterhood economy came in. And the more I thought about it, I kind of turned around and saw that it wasn't a problem that only a country like India had. We're not just a developing issue, which we're not women issues and as women and the economy or the women's internet is not something that belongs to the developing world. It's across the world. Some of the most developed nations today are struggling. Look at the United States. They're still to have their first female president. India India's had two. Or if you look at just the G20, the way we've seen the issues around women come together on the fore with the global South now, or in the Indian context, is far more phenomenal, nuanced, and carefully brought out and crafted, not just at the conference that I'm speaking with you all, but at the entire presidency of G20 here in India. So I think the entire notion of how a sisterhood economy could work is something we've never really given center stage to. And it's high time that we start seeing that higher labor force participation is no longer an option when it comes to women. If we start turning around the notion of participation into aspiration, you will not need to push dialogue to get women to pick economic reins. They will do it on their own. But we change the narrative, we change the cultural thinking, we reverse the notion that the man puts the bread on the table and the woman keeps the bed and the house and the kitchen clean. We suddenly start changing the idea of possibilities. We open up the sky that we all hope that we can sort of carry half of it on our very, very strong shoulders. So I think the notion of the sisterhood economy to me is one where globally women can empower each other rather than wait for the rest of the world, particularly men and the patriarchal system, to empower them.
What a dynamic answer, Shaili. I love it. Now my next question is, because you have a background in media and She the People TV, how can sisterhood economy be portrayed positively in the media, in your opinion?
I think that's a great question. So She the People is 8 years old, 30 million viewers a month, 6 million in social following. We're not even scratching the surface. And we're the biggest platform around women in this country. The reason I say this is because we have actually forgotten that women need spotlight, access to success, just as much as anyone else has had. And it is the one big missing link. The first impression is perception, and perception drives half the world today. Indian women, Australian women, American women, women from Sri Lanka or Maldives, we're all fighting the same big fight. I've done enough, but not enough people know this. Just to give you a dipstick statistic, just in the context of India, 1,000 stories, let's say a sample of 1,000 stories are looked at. Of that, 80% are dedicated to cricket, government, and Bollywood. Of the 200 stories that are left, we've got everything covered, including a sliver of it on women. And most of the stories around the world haven't been inspirational, not about success, not about spotlight, not about what they're doing and how they're breaking barriers, but often about the crimes against women. So I think one of the things that needed to change drastically was, how do we project the way women are breaking barriers, raising economic intentions, and rolling out initiatives that are profitable, businessy, entrepreneurial, noisy. The more we thought about that, the more we realized that was the gap. And that's why when She the People was formed, and for me personally, as a person who had by then finished 15 years in broadcast television, evening after evening, I would interview CEOs, whether these were sporting CEOs or Warren Buffett or Steve Ballmer of Microsoft. And I would ask myself, where are the women? Of the 500 CEOs that I've interviewed, 467 were men. And it wasn't because there weren't women CEOs around us. They were just not being talked about. They were not talked with. What was a large company or a small company? All of these were predefined by a patriarchal system. Today, we've done 500,000 stories of women, and these 500,000 stories of women in India. I haven't even crossed, my own borders. I imagine the possibilities are many. The ability to tell the stories of how they nurture themselves, how they create profitable businesses, how badass they are, how much at the forefront they are at the G20 or the C20 or at this conference. All that needs to be said and loud.
Thank you so much for what you have been contributing. Tell the audience, how can we be a part of what you're doing, the change you're bringing to the world?
I think 4,000 times, if not a million, we've got to be part of the change we want to see, which means we've also got to hold back, change the narrative, say what must be said, and unsay what must not be said. And I think all of those pieces have to come together for us both as men and women. I often say that while women need other female role models, they need more male champions. And when we start seeing that sort of roll out, it is going to bring together a scenario where we can truly say we are beginning to move towards an equal world. The numbers around us continue to be extremely pessimistic. I mean, it's going to take 235 years before men and women will have equal pay. But if you look at some of the global sporting teams, they are making a change. And that change, when reported across media around the world, is actually helping people move the needle in their head. Because a lot of this inequality is in the head. I always wear a t shirt on most of my shows called Created Equal. I just want to remind people that when I came in this world, I didn't have the overhang of inequality or discrimination or stereotypes. I was created equal, irrespective of gender, irrespective of caste, irrespective of identity or race. It is just such a simple phrase to reset that brain cell in our head, which has been sort of cultured by society over the years. So I think to me, one of the biggest shifts that need to happen is that not only do we need to stop looking at a lens that we've been used to and conditioned to, we also need to push women to stop letting this happen to them. They've got to stand up and say, I'm not letting you into that boundary where I reign supreme. It is my space and I am fantastic. And I know what I'm talking about. And I know that I deserve to put my health first. In fact, you introduced me as a founder of She the People in Gayatri.com. Gayatri is focused on putting women's preventative health first. Why? Because around the world, women have been taught how to put yourself last. Last during your conversations, last during the dining table dinner, last during opportunities, last during asking for equal pay, all of it. All of this needs to shift. I think if one were to just look within, I would simply say, remind yourself that if you're not going to take a bet on yourself, don't expect the world to do that. With that, I would urge everyone in this digital conference of Power of Women to say the power of women is not only amazing, but we are the sisterhood that we've missed all these years. Make the most of it.
Wow, thank you so much, Shelley. Thank you. We are truly honored that you were able to share your words of wisdom with all of us. And thank you for joining us today.
Thanks very much, Anali. It's been a pleasure. All the best.
Today, we have the pleasure of having Jessica Zwei joining us today. Jessica is the CEO and founder of Simply Be, a premier personal branding company that transforms corporate teams, executives, spiritual teachers, and entrepreneurs into recognized industry experts and thought leaders. Jessica is also the author of the best-selling book, Be, a no bullshit guide to increasing your self-worth and your net worth by simply being yourself, and the host of top-ranked podcast Simply Be. Today, Jessica will be speaking to us about prosperity and the return to the feminine frequency. Hi, Jessica. Welcome to the Power of Women Digital Conference. It's so nice to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. This is such an honor to be here. I want us to imagine a world where women held every CEO position across every company, in every country, on every continent. And all of their executive teams were women too. I want us to imagine a world where every government official position across every country and each continent was held by women, and all of their cabinets were comprised of women. I want us to imagine a world where every scientist, doctor, researcher, inventor, and innovator were women. I want us to imagine a world where every building ever constructed was designed, architected, and built by women. I want us to imagine a world where every farm was led by women who harvested the crops and raised the animals and cultivated the produce and tended to the land. I want us to imagine a world where every major religious service was led by a woman. I want us to imagine a world where every major sports team was comprised of women and the men were the cheerleaders. Now, I know that this might sound fantastical, unrealistic, and maybe even a bit wild when we think about it. But for a long time, and when I say a long time, I mean hundreds of thousands of years, this was essentially how society was constructed. We lived within a matriarchy. Matriarchal goddesses and their cultures led civilization. They exalted the cultivation of food, agricultural knowledge of herbs, plants, and other natural healing modalities. This was a culture that invented writing, the arts, weaving, textiles, pottery, and the very foundations of civilization itself. Their societies honored animals, honed complex mathematical systems, advanced astronomy, and were the keepers of story, sacred rites, and maintained temples of worship that honored the sacred in all living things. In research, these communities, they've found that there have been no weapons ever to be unearthed, no defensive earthworks found, and there is no evidence of an oppressive, ruling hierarchy or social conflict. But in the last 4,000 years, things changed. The patriarchy was born. Most of our modern day historical teachings and understandings have been written through the lens of the patriarchal masculine, depicting the forming of the world as we all know it today, one that was formed based on religion, recorded war, and the declarations over land and territory. Looking objectively at this historical text recounting the hundreds of marquee events that took place during these ages, you'll see repeated words like civil war, domination, assassinations, conquest, defeats, victories, attacks, persecution, construction, destruction, secession, reign, and rulership. Now, examining all of these words, we can easily see that they don't only characterize history, but our present-day reality. The things that I speak of are not folklore. This is in our DNA as women. And when we simply objectively look at the timeline, what do you think holds more biological weight in how humans evolved? 4,000 years versus 300,000 years, versus 4 billion years, which is the age of the earth. What truly defines our true nature? Historical and religious books written by men, or the civilizations of eons who lived in harmony with the planet? And yet the idea that God was in fact a female since the dawn of civilization might seem impossible to fathom for many of us. But to believe otherwise is our deepest psychological and physiological programming. The patriarchal system of control, supremacy, linear time, separatism, and power, it's so woven into our conditioned consciousness. I say it's like vitamin C in the orange juice. We don't even notice that it's there. It was certainly woven into mine. For the majority of my career up until recently, I played by those rules of the patriarchy. I started a multi-7-figure business, Simply Be Agency, from net negative $0 to now an internationally recognized 30-person full-time team with hundreds of clients across the globe. We wrote a best-selling book, have a #1 ranked podcast. And for a very, very long time, most of my life, I believed that as a woman, because I was a woman, I had to hustle to prove my worth, to overextend myself, to not just thrive, but to simply keep up. And all of that grinding and all of that proving and all of that hustling led me to the winter of 2022, where I reached full-on physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual burnout, to the point where I couldn't leave my house for months at a time. And that's when I really, for the first time in my life, had to examine how hooked in I was to the patriarchal system that was diminishing my innate feminine value. And I've been on a deep healing journey to not only look at my own habits of hustle, but at the world around me and how this society has been designed for me to do just that, to kill myself to keep up. But there is a return. I felt this within myself. I see it around my peers. I see it in the feminine collective. This awakening to the mother goddess within all of us. And it starts with each and every one of us individually, regardless of age, stage in our career, title, socioeconomic status, religion, or otherwise. The feminine has been suppressed. It has been oppressed. It has been rewritten, and it has been forgotten. But this is our time to remember. This is our time to reclaim our true power, to allow for the feminine frequency to rise again in the way that we live, work, and lead. We are now being called to a more gentler, harmonious way of living and being. The time is now to help restore this planet to its original state of the goddess's values of harmony, reciprocity, oneness, and love. And sure, this might sound all beautiful and grandiose, but kind of a big task, right? So where do we start? Does it start in our businesses? Does it start in our communities? Does it even start with our families? The answer is no. It starts with us. How we tend to our bodies, how we remember that our bodies are a piece of the great mother and the great goddess herself. To be gentler, softer, more in tune with our own rhythms. To embrace slowing down, to embrace turning it off, to embrace tuning it out, to tune in, so that we can find our own truth, where we can navigate our lives and our work and our careers, not based on what everyone else is doing and the vibration of the speed of which most of society demands of us, especially as women, but what feels good and right to us. That's what I had to do. I took a deep, long journey within myself, those few months through my depression and seeking help and slowing down and deleting Instagram and hiring a coach and traveling a bit and disconnecting and unhooking from the programming. And on the other side, Not only have I healed, I've healed my business, I've healed my team, I've healed my relationships, and I'm doing better work for my clients and community in the end. This is a time to channel the power of the goddess, to rise in that feminine frequency, to bring that power into not only our businesses and our careers and how we choose to lead them, but our communities and how we choose to care for them, our families and how we choose to nurture them, our industries and networks and how we choose to unapologetically value the feminine in front of them and take a stand for a more loving and inclusive and gentler way. To own and to reclaim and to recall our power and leadership as women means that there can be a world where women are the CEOs and the doctors and the scientists and the government officials and the farmers and the builders and the athletes and the religious leaders. And that this isn't a world of our imagination, but of our reality. But it starts with us. It starts with us remembering so that we can rise again.
Wow. Thank you, Jessica. Everything you shared is so important and crucial. A world with more women representation. Thank you so much for your insights, sharing your story, and for pointing to a collective phenomena that is this feminine frequency rising. It was such a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me and letting me share this message.
Hello, Tanya. Welcome to the Power of Women Digital Conference. Tanya is the visionary CEO behind the international organization Sistership Circle. Tanya, we look forward to hearing what you have to share with us today about sisterhood and building long-lasting friendships.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to share on one of my favorite topics. And that is because I have talked to thousands of women around the world, and I have trained thousands of women around the world how to lead women's circles. And what I have found from being in so many circles and training so many women is that we deeply desire connection with other women. We want partnership. We want to have fulfilling friendships and relationships with other women that go beyond the surface. And yet we feel so disconnected and isolated. And part of that is because of the conditioning. For centuries, women have been pitted against each other. And there is good reason for that. If you think about it, not so long ago, women did not have any rights. We were completely dependent upon men for our survival. And even if you look back in history at the witch burning years, the witch hunts, even though that was a small minority of women, it has affected all women on the subconscious level of this is what happens when you speak out. This is what happens when you're different. And that this is what happens when you come together with other women, because women would actually turn themselves or turn their neighbors in to keep themselves safe. So there's so much mistrust. And what I call this is the sister wound. The sister wound is where we feel disconnected from other women. And it's rooted way back in our history, but it's also rooted in our childhood and some of the ways in which we have been hurt or we have hurt other women, and it keeps us separated from one another. So today I want to share with you the 7 sister wounds that I've identified, and there's so many more, but these are the main 7. And I also want to share with you 5 antidotes. And these antidotes are ways that you can start showing up in relationship with other women to create those partnerships that you're desiring, to have that real and authentic sisterhood. And this relates to all women in our lives. This is our friends, this is our daughters, this is our mothers, this is our coworkers. It shows up everywhere. So let's dive in. So our first sister wound is jealousy. And it can be very challenging to admit that we're jealous of other women because it makes us feel less than, and we don't want to actually admit that. So the question for you to ask yourself is, who do you feel jealous of? And what quality within her or what accomplishment has she had that you feel like you don't? And what are you saying about yourself? Our second sister wound is cattiness. And cattiness are those little snarky remarks, and they can be very subtle or they can be very malicious. So, I remember someone said this once. How did she get on Oprah? And this was spoken about Gabby Bernstein and Marie Forleo. And this person said, she's not the first person I would pick as a spiritual leader of our generation. That's a catty remark. So cattiness is part of this mean girl culture where we're putting other women down, sometimes outright, sometimes subtly, again, to make ourselves feel better. So the question that I want you to ask yourself is, how has cattiness shown up in your relationship with other women? And what's the earliest childhood memory that you can remember where you experienced cattiness? Our third sister wound is exclusion. And this happens in sororities, in clubs, in unofficial girl gangs, and sports teams, and the cheerleading squad, right? We've been conditioned to include some women and exclude others. And this creates more division and separation in our world. So the question I want you to ask yourself is, in the past, did you witness your mother being excluded or excluding other women? Were you part of a club or sorority growing up that excluded other women? And in present time, have you excluded another woman from your current group? And I invite you to look at your mother, because so much of what we learned in terms of how we show up in relationship with mother is what we saw modeled by the women of the generation that raised us. So whether that's your mother or your auntie or your grandmother, whatever you witnessed is what you learned is acceptable, right? So by us looking at what our mothers did, we can start to see some of the conditioning that we learned in relationship to other women. Our fourth sister wound is contraction. And you could think of this as where you're contracting or closing your heart instead of expanding into love, or when you're contracting your energy because you feel like you're too big, too much, too good, and you don't want to let other women feel less than you. This is where we dim our light and we shrink ourselves in order to fit in or to have another woman not feel left out. And so you might feel like, oh, well, that's a good thing, right? I'm not being exclusive. But what it's doing actually is having you not be your true authentic self in order to please other women. So really looking at how you can expand into your leadership, expand and shine your light without feeling like you're going to have other women feel less than. So question to ask yourself is, did you dim your light or shrink back as a child in fear of other girls feeling less than you? What reaction were you most afraid of? Our fifth sister wound is judgment. And we actually see this a lot in the spiritually conscious women community, where other women are made wrong because they're not conscious enough. And so we could see this in any type of community, right? Where we are one-upping and putting others down in order to feel better about ourselves. We're judging women for their appearance. We're judging whether they're good enough for the man that they're with. There's a little bit of similarity, right, with cattiness. So the question I want you to ask yourself is, who is a woman you are judging in your life right now? What are you judging about yourself that you are projecting onto them? Because at the heart of the matter, whoever you're judging, they are just a mere reflection of you. And if you look back, right, if you're pointing a finger at someone, there's 3 fingers coming right back at you. What are you judging within yourself? Number 6 is comparison. And in social media today, we have this distortion, right, with the highlight reels. And most of the time, we only see what other people want us to see. And they only want to show the positive. And so we compare ourselves. And we have become obsessed as a culture with this comparison, with how we look and how we are perceived by others. So the question I want you to ask yourself is, who are you comparing yourself to? Why? And what are you saying about yourself? And then the last sister wound is competition. And this is everywhere. We see this in movies today of competition against women, The Devil Wears Prada, Black Swan, Bring It On, Mean Girls, Single White Female. There's so many movies out there that portray this. It's everywhere. And, we, like I said earlier, around, we depended on men for our survival. And so competition was built into the framework where you might be in competition for a man, for status, or for your own survival. And then we see this with our jobs today, with friend groups. And the question I want you to ask yourself is, who do you feel in competition with? What's her gift? And then what's yours? How can you shift that to see this woman actually as a future collaborator? And on the flip side, who's in competition with you? So when we are looking at competition, what we are failing to see is our own gift, and that no 2 women are alike, that there really is truly no competition, because we each are attracting exactly who is a vibrational match to our energy. And while I'll use an example, to acupuncturists, it might look like on the surface that they are 2 acupuncturists in the same town competing for the same market. The one acupuncturist has special gifts and may have that specialty that the other one doesn't, who actually focuses on something else. And so when we focus on those gifts, we can see that these sisters are not our competition. They are our allies. So let's flip this, shall we? Shall we flip this and have some antidotes here? So the first antidote here is compassion and humility. To seek to understand other women from their shoes. Imagine what other women are going through. And a lot of times this comes when we're judging other women and we forget that they might actually be hurt. They might be trying to make themselves look a certain way to hide insecurities. And so we can start to come from eyes of compassion for our sisters and know that we are all good women doing the best we can. Number 2 is vulnerability. Now, I know this can be so hard. And like I said with social media, we only want to show the highlight reel, but that creates more disconnection. And when we can actually be authentic and we can be vulnerable with other women, we can start to create the deep and more meaningful relationships. We can have the more deep and meaningful conversations that we're looking for. That's what creates real and authentic sisterhood. That's what creates relationships that feel real versus superficial. So here's a simple formula for you to share your hurt feelings from vulnerability, because that's one of the things that keeps us separate, is we get our feelings hurt by another woman and then we shove her away, we cut her off, we cancel her. But here's what you could do instead. I feel whatever emotion when you said or did X action. It reminds me of what's the past event or past person or experience that this is reminding you of. I'm curious as to what was going on for you when you did that so that I can understand if this was intentional or not. So I'll give an example. I felt sad when you ignored me when I came into the room. You didn't come over and say hello. It reminded me of when I was a little girl and I would walk into the house and my mother wouldn't greet me. I'm curious as to what was going on for you when you didn't say anything to me so that I could see if this was intentional or not. Our next antidote is acceptance. And this one comes from within. Can you accept yourself as enough without needing approval or to be liked? Because all of these sister wounds are coming from you not fully valuing and accepting yourself, covering up insecurities. And so once you have that acceptance for yourself and you can see that you are enough, you can start to grow that out to accept others. Our next antidote is collaboration. And this goes with that competition, where what if the women who are your perceived competition are actually your collaborators? So there's another organization called Global Sisterhood. And from the outside, it looks like the competitor to Sistership Circle. But I don't see them as my competition because I see what they offer is much different. Even though we're both training women how to lead women's circles, we do it differently. And so I have this book that I created, and it's collaborator book. So there's 40 rituals from 40 different women, and it's called the Women's Circle Ritual Handbook. And I invited them, the founders of Global Sisterhood, to write a ritual and contribute it to the book, because I truly see us as collaborators. And then our final antidote here is to celebrate one another. And this is what happens in a women's circle. This is my favorite part of the work that I do in the world, is the celebration that takes place in real and authentic sisterhood when women are gathering in a safe and sacred container together. They celebrate each other and they celebrate themselves without feeling like they're going to have someone else feel worse than. And that's because we shift into the mindset of one woman's win is a win for all women. If she wins, that's a win for me too. And in fact, when she celebrates herself, it can have me see what else is possible if I'm feeling bad about myself in this moment. It can have me get out of my own way and stop dwelling in my own self-pity and get into her world and celebrate with her. So when we can truly celebrate ourselves and be happy for each other's success, we can heal the sister wound. And we can see each other not as a threat or not as someone to compare ourselves to, but we can see that if she can do it, I can too. And together we will rise. So I hope that these antidotes help you to develop partnership with other women and with other powerful women who are up to big things and who are consciously living their lives empowering one another. So thank you so much for having me. And I hope that you will go out there and do the work to heal the sister wound so that together we can rise.
Wow. I think, Tanya, what you just shared is so powerful. And I don't even know where to begin, from the sisterhood wounds to the solutions you provided, you know. I think a lot of girls can resonate, a lot of women can resonate. And this is what the power of women is about, stepping into your innate power and also recognizing other women and men for their value, and also the collaboration component. I mean, it's not competition, it's about collaboration and each of us bringing our gifts to see how we can work together. So thank you so much. This was a beautiful, beautiful piece.
excited to be here. We are just closing in the third 12 hours of the 48 hours as we move into the last 12 hours. Wow, Ashley, we have come so far, huh?
Yes, so many good insights, and it's been so lovely.
And I really want to take this moment to thank our team who has got us this far. Hubcast Media, you guys have been sleepless. I don't even know if y'all got any sleep. I know we have been all up, but y'all have had your one eye open at all times, working so hard. And Neil, you being out there. And then I know we have our other team members, David to Michael to, I'm not even getting all the names out there right now, but you know who you are. We want to recognize you. Thank you for being here and supporting us. And we are going to be moving into our last 12 hours, which is going to be the closing 12 hours. And before that, we're also moving into our town hall session, the digital town hall. And yeah, Ashley?
Yeah, I also want to say thank you so much. And also just be real, right? We are operating with a very lean team and working with Hubcast Media Productions and Neil and just the incredible people that have been so supportive and really hands-on. This is a 48-hour marathon, essentially. It's team no sleep. And we are bringing this broadcast to you with so much love and joy in the process. We really hope that you are enjoying every minute of it. And ultimately, thank you. We want to thank our team for just sticking with us here throughout the time. So
yeah, I mean, we got the 3/4 done, and we are from like what, 5 different time zones we are all working from around the world. We are covering the whole clock. And Sister Jenna, I know she was supposed to go to sleep, and she was texting me at like what, 3 in the morning, 2 in the morning. We are all working, and we are excited to go into the digital town hall. And I want to actually bring up something before we even switch back. What Tanya just shared, I mean, from Reverend Michael Beckwith to what Shaylee shared from She the People, and then Tanya, I think that was so amazing. Healing the sisterhood wounds, to really, I mean, think about what are we doing. I mean, I think that's the beautiful thing, right? When we heal as women, we really open up the space for everybody else. And I think just going into this digital town hall with all of you being a part of it, it's going to be broadcasted live. So you're all going to be a part of the events out there for all our audience to see. I think it's very special what she shared, so we can discuss that as well. And yeah.
And let's also talk about the feminine rising. Dr. Reverend Beckwith mentioned that, as well as Jessica. Let's have these honest discussions, and we look forward to it.
Yes, and I know we are now going to be switching to our last part 4. So if you need to access this link, you have to go to our website. So the streaming will stop because we have to reset everything and then get everything back online and get into our last 12 hours as we are going into the closing 12 hours, actually. So just go on our website to get the link. It will be up there. And yeah, just give us about 5-6 minutes to reset everything. In the meantime, please, we sent 2 emails via Zoom, and Ashley and I sent one as well, reminding you with the link how to join if you signed up. We had a lot of signups. So we're looking forward to seeing you, talking to you, and having you all meet each other. So
it's going to be fun. So we'll see you on the other side. You all have the Zoom link now. So we'll see.
I want to say one more thing, actually. So we tried to set up multiple Zoom rooms, but we had I think 2-3 times the amount we mentioned yesterday. But we can only have 100. Hopefully you can all make it because we will only have one Zoom room. So for broadcasting purposes, so join in.
Yay, this is going to be fun.
We'll see you soon.